It was a rainy Monday morning, and the city seemed to move in shades of gray. The streets glistened under the drizzle as Maya, a young delivery girl, hurried toward the tall glass tower of Crescent Global, her shoes squeaking with every step. The building was intimidating. Its walls reflected the sky, its doors guarded by security, and its lobby filled with people dressed in expensive suits. Maya adjusted the wet strands of hair sticking to her face and clutched the documents close to her chest. She had been making deliveries across the city for years, but something about this place felt different. As she entered the grand lobby, she felt small, almost invisible, while polished shoes clicked around her and the sound of conversation filled the air. No one looked her way. To them, she was just another delivery worker passing through. Yet Maya carried herself with quiet dignity, her tired eyes showing strength beyond her years. When the receptionist pointed her toward the top floor, she hesitated for a moment, gazing up at the sleek elevators that seemed to whisper wealth and power. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, feeling the slow ascent pull her away from the noise of the city below. When the doors opened, she was greeted by the sight of a wide conference room filled with executives, their eyes on glowing screens and thick files. At the center of it all sat Mr. Donovan Hale, the CEO, a man whose name was known across the industry. His sharp suit and confident tone filled the space. Yet there was something cold about his presence, as if the world existed to orbit him. Maya quietly entered, her footsteps almost silent on the marble floor. She placed the documents on the table, careful not to disturb anyone, but Mr. Hale's gaze caught her. His eyes scanned her worn-out jacket, her soaked shoes, and the smudged delivery badge on her chest. He smiled faintly, not unkindly, but with a trace of amusement. "So, Maya," he said in a light, teasing tone, "any business tips for a struggling CEO today?" His words drew laughter from the room, polite, practiced, the kind that fills space rather than meaning it. Maya froze for a moment, unsure if she was supposed to laugh too. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not arrogance, but someone who had forgotten what humility looked like. The laughter faded slightly when she didn't respond right away. Then, with a calm smile and steady eyes, she said softly, "Maybe one or two." The air seemed to shift. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an unexpected weight, like someone who had lived enough to understand more than she showed. A few of the executives exchanged glances, waiting for her to explain. But Maya didn't. She simply picked up her delivery slip and waited for the signature, her expression unreadable. Mr. Hale's smile faltered just slightly, curiosity flickering behind his confident eyes. For the first time in that meeting, the CEO felt unsure. As Maya handed him the pen, their hands briefly touched, and he noticed how rough her skin was, how cold her fingers felt from the rain. There was something about her presence, a kind of quiet composure that didn't fit the role of an ordinary delivery worker. "Maybe one or two," she had said, but her tone wasn't prideful. It was gentle, like a reminder he hadn't asked for. When she turned to leave, the sound of her footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor, fading as the elevator doors closed behind her. The room remained silent for a moment, the earlier laughter replaced by a subtle tension no one could explain. Mr. Hale leaned back in his chair, staring at the closed door, his pen tapping absent-mindedly against the documents she had delivered. Something about her words lingered, refusing to leave his mind. He didn't know why, but he wanted to see her again, not as a joke, not as a delivery girl, but as someone who had dared to speak with quiet confidence in a room full of power. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city in silver streaks, and somewhere in the distance, Maya was already walking toward her next delivery, unaware that her calm reply had just planted a question in the heart of a man who thought he had all the answers. The room fell completely silent, the kind of silence that feels heavier than words. Mr. Donovan Hale, the powerful CEO of Crescent Global, leaned forward in his chair with a grin that tried to hide his curiosity. "All right then," he said, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. "Let's hear them." The executives shifted slightly, still amused, expecting a nervous laugh or a clumsy excuse from the delivery girl standing before them. But Maya didn't flinch. She placed the stack of documents neatly on the polished table and straightened her posture. Her rain-soaked jacket clung to her shoulders, and a small drop of water slipped from her hair onto the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. Her calmness drew attention, her silence commanding more respect than anyone expected. Then, with a quiet strength, she spoke. "If you want your company to grow," she said, her voice steady and sincere, "start listening to the people who build it from the ground up." The words were simple, yet they cut through the air like a blade. A few executives stopped pretending to check their phones. Maya looked around the table, her eyes meeting theirs one by one, and continued. "Every business is only as strong as the people you overlook." The last word, overlook, hung in the air, like smoke, refusing to fade. No one moved. The laughter that had filled the room just a minute ago had vanished completely. The executives who had been smirking now exchanged uneasy glances, while Mr. Hale's grin slowly disappeared. For the first time in years, the confident CEO didn't have a clever reply ready. He looked at Maya, trying to decide whether her words were bold, foolish, or wise. Yet something inside him, something buried under layers of pride and success, stirred uncomfortably. Maya didn't seem to notice the shift in the room. She wasn't trying to make a statement or prove a point. Her tone carried no anger, no disrespect, only truth spoken with quiet conviction. Mr. Hale leaned back in his chair, studying her. He had built his empire from a small startup into a global brand, and yet he realized he hadn't spoken to his delivery staff or floor workers in years. He couldn't even remember the name of the man who cleaned his office every evening. Her words felt like a mirror, reflecting everything he had forgotten about leadership. Around the table, a few executives tried to break the tension with forced smiles, but the spell wasn't easy to undo. The room that had once felt bright and full of confidence now felt strangely cold. Mr. Hale cleared his throat, pretending to look at the papers she'd delivered, but the words on the pages blurred before his eyes. All he could think about was that sentence, "Every business is only as strong as the people you overlook." It echoed in his mind, louder than his own thoughts. The silence stretched, growing awkward, until Maya gently asked, "Would you like me to get a signature for the delivery, sir?" Her tone was polite, professional, and it somehow deepened his discomfort. Mr. Hale nodded slowly, signing the slip without saying a word. When she turned to leave, the sound of her footsteps seemed louder than before, echoing through the room like an unspoken reminder. The executives watched her go, unsure whether they had just witnessed an act of courage or coincidence. As the elevator doors closed behind her, the room remained unnaturally quiet. One of the senior managers finally spoke in a low voice, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, she certainly knows how to make an impression." But Mr. Hale didn't respond. He sat there, staring at the closed doors, lost in thought. The laughter that had filled the meeting earlier now felt foolish, almost shameful. He glanced at the faces around the table, men and women who looked just as uneasy as he felt, and realized that Maya, a young woman soaked from the rain and earning barely enough to get by, had managed to silence a room full of millionaires. As the meeting resumed, his words stumbled, his usual confidence gone. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just heard something important, something he was meant to understand. Long after everyone left, Mr. Hale remained in his chair, the city lights flickering against the glass walls. Outside, the rain continued to fall, tapping gently against the windows, as if reminding him of the voice that had pierced his pride. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, the simple words of a delivery girl, would soon become the turning point of his life. That night, as the city lights blurred past his car window, Mr. Donovan Hale couldn't stop hearing Maya's voice. Her words repeated in his mind like a song he couldn't turn off. Every business is only as strong as the people you overlook. It was strange how a single sentence from someone he'd never met before could unsettle him so deeply. The rain had stopped, but the weight of her truth followed him all the way home. In his quiet mansion, surrounded by everything he thought defined success, luxury, awards, and silence, he realized how empty it all felt. He thought about the hundreds of people who worked for him, people whose faces he barely knew, whose names he had never asked. For years, he had believed that leadership meant distance, that respect came from power. But now, that belief felt hollow. He slept little that night, turning restlessly as her voice echoed again and again in his thoughts. By morning, something inside him had shifted. He rose earlier than usual, skipped his usual driver, and took his car to the office himself. When he arrived, the security guards straightened in confusion as he greeted them politely, something he'd never done before. Instead of heading to his top-floor office, Mr. Hale took the elevator down, all the way to the delivery bay, a place he hadn't seen since the company's early years. The air there was different, colder, filled with the scent of metal, oil, and effort. Workers looked up from their boxers and scanners, blinking in disbelief. It wasn't every day the CEO showed up in their world. Some thought it was a joke. Others stood frozen, unsure if they should greet him or hide. Mr. Hale smiled awkwardly, realizing how strange he must look in his tailored suit among people wearing work gloves and uniforms. "Good morning," he said, his voice a little uncertain. "I thought I'd come see how things are going down here." A man wiping sweat from his forehead chuckled nervously. "Everything's fine, sir. We didn't expect you." Hale nodded, looking around at the stacked packages, the tired faces, the rhythm of unseen labor that kept his empire running. "I know," he admitted quietly. "That's exactly why I'm here." He began asking questions: how long shifts ran, what kind of challenges they faced, what could be improved. At first, no one believed he truly wanted to know. But as he listened without interrupting, something in their expressions changed. One by one, people began to speak, cautiously at first, then more openly. They told him about broken equipment, long hours, poor communication with management. Some spoke of pride in their work, but also of feeling invisible. Hale listened to it all, taking mental notes, his heart growing heavier with every story. Later, he made his way to the staff cafeteria, a place he had only seen in blueprints. The room was noisy, filled with laughter and the smell of cheap coffee. When he stepped inside, the noise stopped. Every eye turned toward him. A spoon clattered onto a tray. "Don't stop eating," he said gently, raising a hand. "I just wanted to join you." A few exchanged uncertain glances, and someone awkwardly made space for him at a corner table. Hale sat down, unbuttoned his jacket, and asked about their day. Slowly, the conversation returned, hesitant but genuine. One woman, a cook who had been working there for 15 years, spoke about her son's education and how her job helped her keep him in school. Another worker mentioned how they used to feel proud wearing the company badge until it started to feel like no one noticed their efforts. Every story hit him like a quiet truth. These were the people who made his vision real, yet they were treated as if they existed on the edge of it. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man finally waking up. As he left the cafeteria, he looked around at the walls, plain, cracked, and dull. The contrast between this space and his glossy boardroom upstairs was almost painful. He realized Maya had been right all along. Success wasn't measured by the height of the building or the number of investors. It was built by the hands and hearts of those who worked unseen. When Hale stepped outside, into the cool morning air, the city was waking up around him, the sky tinted gold with sunrise. For the first time, he didn't rush to his office. He stood still, breathing deeply, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: humility. and as he looked up at the towering glass windows of his company, he knew this was only the beginning of the change that had quietly begun to grow inside him. All because of one delivery girl's brave, honest words. A week later, the atmosphere inside Crescent Global was different. There was a quiet energy in the air, something new yet unspoken. The employees whispered among themselves about a special meeting that Mr. Donovan Hale had called. It wasn't one of his usual, high-level board sessions. This time, it was a small employee feedback meeting, and everyone was surprised to hear that workers from all levels of the company had been invited. Even more shocking was one particular name on the list, Maya, the delivery girl. The same girl who had once walked in with rain-soaked shoes and left the entire boardroom speechless. When she received the invitation, Maya thought it was a mistake. Why would the CEO of a global company want her, an ordinary courier, in an official meeting? But curiosity and courage pushed her to go. On the day of the meeting, she wore her cleanest shirt and a modest smile, trying to calm her racing heart as she stepped once more into the towering building that had changed her life. The same glass walls reflected her nervous face, but this time, she walked with a quiet sense of belonging. As she entered the conference room, everyone turned toward her. The same executives who had once laughed at her were now on their feet, greeting her politely. Mr. Hale himself walked forward to welcome her, his tone sincere and warm. "I'm really glad you came, Maya," he said, offering a seat beside him. "You taught me something I should have known years ago." The room went silent again, but this time, the silence was not of mockery, it was of respect. Maya looked unsure, glancing around the table, her hands trembling slightly. She had never sat in such a meeting before, surrounded by people who held power in their voices and influence in their words. But Mr. Hale gave her an encouraging nod, and that was enough to steady her heart. "Would you share your story with us?" he asked gently. She hesitated for a moment, then began speaking, her voice soft but full of truth. "I grew up watching my mother work 2 jobs, she said, her gaze fixed on the polished surface of the table. She used to clean offices during the day and deliver food at night. She always told me that no one is too small to make a big difference. I didn't really understand it then, but now, I think I do." Her words drew everyone in. She spoke about how her mother never complained, how she always smiled despite exhaustion, and how Maya herself had started working young to help with bills. "I've seen people look down on workers like us," she continued, "as if hard work only matters when it's seen by others. But every big thing in this world stands because of small hands holding it up." Her honesty filled the room with an emotional stillness. Even the executives who had once dismissed her sat silently, their expressions softening. Some looked down, perhaps reflecting on their own arrogance, while others nodded faintly in agreement. Mr. Hale listened intently, his eyes thoughtful. It was rare for him to feel humbled, but in that moment, he realized how blind he had been to the quiet struggles that built his empire. "Maya," he said when she finished, his voice sincere, "you reminded me of what leadership truly means. It's not about power, it's about people." The workers in the room smiled, feeling seen for the first time. Maya blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the sudden respect and attention. She hadn't meant to teach anyone a lesson. She had only spoken what she believed, but sometimes, truth had its own power, the power to open eyes and hearts without raising a voice. Mr. Hale then turned to his senior managers. "From today," he said firmly, "we'll start hearing from every department, every team, not just the ones at the top, because wisdom doesn't come with a title." There was a quiet round of applause, not loud or formal, but real, a soft, human sound of gratitude and change. Maya sat there, still trying to believe what was happening. The same room that had once felt like a mountain above her now felt like level ground. As the meeting ended, Mr. Hale shook her hand once more. "Your mother was right," he said with a gentle smile. No one is too small to make a big difference. As Maya left the room, sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting a golden glow across the floor. The once gold building now felt alive, not just with success, but with humanity. And as Mr. Hale watched her walk away, he knew that, in a single week, a simple delivery girl had managed to do what years of business training never could. She had taught a CEO how to listen, and how to truly lead. Months passed, and Crescent Global no longer felt like the same company it once was. The glass walls still gleamed, the meetings still took place, and the deadlines still came, but something deeper had changed, something invisible yet powerful. The air itself carried a new sense of warmth. Employees greeted each other with genuine smiles. Managers listened instead of ordering, and even the lower staff walked with pride instead of fear. It was as if the company had rediscovered its heartbeat. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it began with one man's humility, Mr. Donovan Hale, the CEO who had once laughed at a delivery girl's quiet confidence. Since that day, he had made it his mission to rebuild not just his business, but its soul. Every week, he visited different departments, talked with employees, and asked what they needed to make their work better. Slowly, trust began to bloom where fear had once lived. The cafeteria walls were repainted, new resting spaces were made, and suggestion boxes filled faster than ever before. And among those small, steady changes, Maya's name became quietly known throughout the company. She had returned to her delivery job, never expecting anything more, but her story had spread like a whisper that inspired everyone. Then, one morning, she received a call that left her speechless. Mr. Hale wanted to meet her again. When she walked into his office, she saw the same man but with softer eyes, the kind that had learned to see differently. "Maya," he said kindly, "your words didn't just change me, they changed this company. I want you to be part of that change." He offered her a position in the communications department, not as a gesture of pity, but as recognition of her wisdom and clarity. She hesitated at first, unsure if she belonged in a corporate environment, but his next words convinced her. "We don't need more experience here," he said, smiling. "We need more heart." And so, Maya began her new journey, sitting not at the edge of the system, but within it. Her presence was quiet, yet powerful. She spoke little, but when she did, people listened. Her ideas helped reshape how the company shared stories, highlighting workers who had never been noticed before, telling their struggles, their victories, their dedication. Every internal newsletter carried her touch of empathy. Every company event carried her belief that no one was too small to matter. Soon, other companies began to notice Crescent Global's transformation. Articles were written about its new, human-first culture, about how a business known for numbers had learned the value of kindness. Mr. Hale never took credit for it. Instead, he often smiled and said, "The best lessons don't come from the top, they rise from the ground." The real moment of change came during the company's annual meeting, a grand event held in a shining auditorium, filled with employees, investors, and guests from across the city. The hall buzzed with excitement as Mr. Hale stepped onto the stage. His voice carried confidence, but not the kind that came from power this time. It came from purpose. He spoke about growth, innovation, and success, but then paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Before I continue," he said, "I want to remind us all of a truth that changed this company." He turned toward Maya, seated in the front row, her eyes wide with disbelief as the spotlight caught her face. "A young woman once told me something simple but unforgettable," he continued. She said, "Every business is only as strong as the people you overlook." The room fell silent, and then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then rising into a wave of emotion that filled the hall. Maya lowered her head, tears gathering in her eyes, while the people around her clapped not for a CEO, not for a delivery girl, but for the truth they both represented. Mr. Hale smiled, his voice warm with gratitude. "Leadership isn't about standing above others," he said. "It's about standing beside them." The applause grew louder, echoing through the vast space, like a heartbeat of unity. In that moment, Crescent Global wasn't just a company, it was a family bound by respect. And as the meeting ended, Maya stepped outside into the sunlight, feeling the world around her brighter than ever. She had entered that building once as a nameless worker, invisible to all, but now she walked out as a symbol of change. Her mother's words echoed gently in her mind. No one is too small to make a big difference. And somewhere high above, behind the glass walls of his office, Mr. Hale watched her leave with a quiet smile, knowing that she had not just taught him a lesson in leadership, she had taught him how to be human again.